what's the major difference between Labour and the Liberal Democrats?
Well, I think the last 5 years of coalition government has been a disaster. It's been a disaster for our public services. It's been a disaster for our communities, particularly those on low incomes and those relying on benefits in the welfare state. And it's been a disaster for our economy. And I think that's a thing that's not been picked up by the mainstream media. The idea that the Conservative parties save the economy. They've destroyed our economy. We've got the lowest productivity in Europe. We've got the slowest recovery from recession on record and the longest prolonged squeeze on living standards in record. And it's time for a change.
We are, the best way of putting it is we are more concerned with individual issues, whereas I think they are more concerned with group issues.
Well, for a start, it's a whole way of thinking. It's put where your priorities are, getting away from putting the priorities in the hands of the rich and the powerful and standing up to the rich and the powerful, which Ed Miliband shows he can do with the way he stood up to Rupert Murdoch, the way he stood up to the energy companies, the way he stood up to war in Syria. But it's also about reinforcing the minimum wage, supporting the living wage, ending 0 hours contracts, getting rid of the bedroom tax, supporting working people and putting investment in where it counts.
The major difference, I think you have to look nationally and locally. I don't know, what
I would say the major difference is we are more focused on local requirements and also on keeping the country on the track that we have tried to help set it on up to now.
Now, the Labour Party, I think, is more committed to working on behalf of ordinary working people.
We would believe that there are a number of things that this country has needed, and one of them in the last 5 years was stable government, which I fear we may not get after this election. And the reason we think that was important, coalition is a situation in which you win some, you lose some. And it's true that we had to, the Liberal Democrats had to swallow a number of things that the Tories wanted we didn't like. Yes, but they had to swallow quite a number of things that they didn't like that we wanted.
That
my favourite example
now.
Sorry?
That they're claiming the credit for now.
Well, of course they are, because they're dishonest. But my favourite example is apprenticeships, which had faded almost to nothing before, and now they're going to be in the millions. And that's a terribly important way of getting young people into useful, not only remunerative, but helpful work if they can't get into university, but they want to work at skill jobs, and rather than hanging around on the dole, which is what I'm afraid too many do now.
Hannah.
Adam.
Ellen. Pauline.
Okay, so this is a Team Labour, I'm taking it.
Too right.
Yeah.
Good.
Team West.
Team Catherine West.
There
I
we
just
go.
spoke to Catherine West.
Good.
Right.
Up in Wood Green.
The next MP for Hornsey Wood Green.
Okay. So why should we be voting for Catherine West and Labour altogether?
Labour's the party of fairness. It's about reducing inequalities. That's especially important in London, where there are massive inequalities between rich and poor, between those who have and those who haven't, and it's something we need to all be addressing.
And it's just about ensuring that Hornsey Green has a loud voice in Westminster for the issues that matter, building more homes, tax cuts for millionaires not being the priority, but scrapping the bedroom tax and saving our NHS from the nasty mitts of Lynn Featherstone and Tory allies.
The problem I'm getting now from a lot of people is they don't trust politicians. Why should we trust Labour politicians?
You should trust Catherine West because of her record in Islington Council. She's a superb politician and she got so much done.
Yeah,
in
get stuff
Islington.
done, yeah.
For example, what does she get done?
Built 2,000 homes. She brought a number of services that had been on the downward, or on a downer, back in-house. And I think ultimately she provided the kind of leadership that we don't only need to see in local government, but we need to see in Westminster,
Exactly.
which stands in stark contrast to what we've seen over the last 5 years, and a victory here tonight or tomorrow will put us on the path to getting Britain back on track.
And these homes, are these affordable homes?
Well, and absolutely right. These homes weren't at Tory Boris Johnson's 8% of market rate, they were target rent, which means that more families from all parts of the world and all communities are able to access that decent housing that everyone needs.
And Ed Miliband has said that he would do more to help housing as well. He's also said that he wouldn't take part in a coalition government. Do you believe that to be true, or do you think that's in the best interest of the general public?
Well, there's going to be a Labour majority government tomorrow, and I'm looking forward to seeing Ed Miliband run the country for the next 5 years. That's what we're fighting for.
If that may not happen, would you be happy in a coalition?
Oh, we're not contemplating anything other than a majority Ed Miliband government. And that's why we've got to go now, because we're going to fight for it.
All right. Thank you all for your time.
Cheers.
Thanks.
Bye.
Cheers. What exactly is this polling station for, and how do you vote?
Well, essentially the polling station is it's the place where the local constituents are able to come and make their votes. So they have to make the place accessible to everybody, provide assistance for them, and ensure that their votes are returned safely to the returning officer so that they can be counted up later on.
Okay, do you expect a large turnout?
Around this station,
This
yes,
station is
quite high.
quite politically contested, and traditionally it's one of the highest voting polling stations in the borough.
So why exactly is it important to vote?
Well, lots of people died to secure the vote for ordinary people, and so this is a way of expressing your beliefs and expressing your belief in democracy. And at this election particularly, there are very, very many important issues that are going to decide the way the country goes in the future. Are we going to go for a more United Kingdom, or are we going to separate the rich from the poor?
I study politics and I'm meant to know about this.
Wow, you study what made you want to study politics?
Interested in law a bit, so it's relevant, I suppose. And learning about how it works is quite interesting. Though I'm less into the current situation.
Come out and vote, your vote counts. And the point is, it's important to vote, because what we want to show this election is that people have voted for what they believe in, and if they don't get anybody elected, we should look for a different form of democratic accountability and go for proportional representation. Wow, finito.
So you don't vote because...
I'm voting for the devil and his proteges, because anyone that goes in doesn't have no good to me, doesn't do no good for me.
What do you mean they don't do any good? What exactly?
Well, there's nothing for the black man, is there?
What would the black man want?
Well, freedom for a change.
Yeah. So you think oppression's still happening?
Don't think, no, still happening.
But don't you think Ed Miliband would be, or well, I would like to say Nick Clegg, but don't you think maybe other parties, or even David Cameron, I shouldn't generalise, may not agree with you?
We may not agree with me, but the truth is the truth, innit?
Okay.
Doesn't do nothing for black people.
What about the Greens? You think they like black people?
Well, I don't see how.
Okay.
They're all the same. The politics is politics.
Politics.
Just politics.
So, but in that light, what should black people do? Because obviously there's loads of black people here. Maybe they're coming together to do something?
Form their own lobby groups.
What in what type of lobby groups? Nation of Islam type groups? Or?
Possibly, but something concrete that will help black people or benefit black people.
What, education-wise?
Education, work-wise, cultural-wise. None of them have done anything for us.
Because some might say, when you look at, say, a Trevor McDonald, Linford Chris, a puppet.
Yeah, Trevor McDonald's a puppet.
A Frank Bruno.
A gimmick.
Well, there must be one or two black people that have done well, and that politically they've would
done
say
well. But what have they done for the black community? That's the question.
So you think the politicians are not able to do stuff?
No, their hands are tied.
Oh, and if your hands were tied and you had to vote for one person, who would it be?
None.
Frank Bruno.
None.
Well, okay, that's an interesting point, because especially around here, there's a large black community in Haringey.
Yes.
There's an Afro-Caribbean centre, I think I'm right.
Yes.
And there seems to be a lot of black people doing okay. I mean,
doing okay individually, but collectively we're not doing nothing for each other.
Okay, and you don't think any of these parties can do that for you?
No.
So what's your name?
Amy Azari Najad.
Great name. Say it again for me.
Amy Azari Najad.
Okay. And who did you vote for, Amy?
I vote for Labour.
And why did you vote for Labour?
Well, I don't know whether just because I was younger, but I remember when Labour were in party last time, like my family and friends and stuff, no one really seemed to complain as much about the government. And obviously I come from like a massive working class background, and I think what Labour do when they're on party is a lot better than what the Conservatives and the Tories have done.
In what way is it better?
Well, when the Labour was in
Yeah.
party, I think they thought of the working class a lot more. I think the problem with the Tories is that a lot of people within that party have never probably shot for something themselves in their lives or really worked hard. I mean, I know a lot of people have worked their way up, but I think within Labour it's kind of their job to understand and be sympathetic towards those who don't have a lot of money. And I think that's what's better, because even with the NHS, they put them forward and there was less hospital closures, education wasn't as expensive. I mean, I'm finished in uni now, but I'm going to be like 20,000-30,000 pounds in debt, whereas when Labour went, I would have only been like £9,000 in debt, which is my yearly salary.
So are you hoping that it's a majority Labour government?
I'm hoping it is going to be a majority Labour. I mean, say what you want about Ed Miliband, but I like him. I think he seems more approachable. He's a bit dorky, but he's a lot more approachable, and I think that's a really good thing to be if you're in power. David Cameron, like a lot of my friends work in politics, and they meet David Cameron a lot of times, and they said that he's just not a nice person to meet.
Okay, in what ways isn't David Cameron a nice person to meet?
But just his views. I mean, there was that interview or something the other day when he slipped up and basically said voting for him is for his career and not the country.
Okay.
And I just don't. David Cameron's not a nice man. They asked him how much a loaf of bread was, and he didn't know. Like, I just don't think he just doesn't come across as a very nice person.
So you see Ed Miliband as approachable, down to earth, a person of the people.
Yeah, I see him as a person of the people. I mean, I know he doesn't come from particularly a working class background, but when he was younger, he was trying to get minimum wage hired. David Cameron wasn't. He wasn't doing anything like that.
And if you could say one thing to Ed Miliband if you met him, what would that be?
I'd want to ask him what he's going to do about London rent prices, and I think that's one of the most things I'm looking forward to if Labour got into power, is they want to get rid of bedroom tax. And he has said something about how he wants to put caps on renting and allow extensions of contracts before rent can be put up. My friend moved to London 2 months ago, but she's already got to find somewhere else to live because her landlord's putting the rent up.
How much has the rent been put up?
She was paying 500, but he's putting up to 700.
And that's for a room, a studio flat?
It's going to be a room in a 4-bedroom house.
Wow. Is there a living room in that house for her?
No.
So someone will be paying £700 a month to rent a room.
For rent a room, that's not massive. I mean, I'm from Liverpool, and I used to live in the city centre and pay £400 a month including bills for a whole flat to myself, not even a bedsit or a studio, and it was in a Georgian Quarter conversion. Now I'm living in my mate's what was living room, and I pay £550 a month, not including bills, and I really cannot justify the rent prices in London. I can't. There is absolutely no reason, and I'm happy to vote for someone who's going to put caps on rent prices and stop them going up.
And what would you say to David Cameron if you met him? Give us a kiss?
I don't think I'd want to speak to him. I think I'd ignore him. I understand how politics work, and I know it's not one person, and I know it's a whole party. However, I just can't. I don't agree with anything to the Tories. Even when Margaret Thatcher was in power, she destroyed the North. David Cameron's got such precedence against the North, and obviously that's where I'm from, and the North is unfortunately primarily working class, and I think David Cameron, he's trying to keep London for the rich, and that's why a lot of people are leaving London and Liverpool has changed so much over the past couple of years because people are moving back to London or bringing London to there, so Liverpool's gone amazing. There's so much more culture and shops and restaurants and everything there because people are leaving. But I don't think it's correct that how my friends are married and they couldn't ever buy a house here because of how expensive it is.
What would you do if elected? What are your plans?
Well, our priorities are, number 1, the National Health Service, protecting the NHS. Number 2, scrapping the bedroom tax, which we find cruel and unfair, which the Coalition has brought in. And number 3, helping young people get on in life to study and learn, and also to get jobs and apprenticeships. Here in Wood Green, we think 47% of young people who are black and ethnic minority are unemployed, And one of my top priorities will be to tackle youth unemployment, particularly in our community, because I feel that that's holding people back. People are studying harder and harder, they're getting better results, they're getting better degrees and so on, but it's really difficult for them to get on in life, and we really want to fix that in the Labour Party and make sure that young people get the chances and the opportunities which they deserve.
Okay, and in terms of housing, how would you help in that way?
Well, what we want to do first of all is allow people to save if they do want to buy a house, or in any case just rent so that it's affordable. And so what we'd like to do with the private rental sector is to apply a cap so that the rents can only increase in line with inflation. Because at the moment rents are just increasing at the whim of the landlord, and we actually need to really address that and make sure that rents only increase in line with inflation. Number two, that we have really high quality private sector accommodation. At the moment we've got a lot of problems with damp and so on. We need to be addressing that. And number three, we want to ban letting fees. At the moment the letting agents are charging up to £300 for just basically doing a tenancy agreement, and that's not something which is helping working people who are trying to get into these homes and yet are being charged ridiculous amounts of money just to basically have a tenancy agreement. And also on the tenancy agreements, we want to have them as 3-year tenancy agreements, not just 6 months. So the 6-month tenancy agreement, you don't really know what you're doing from one day to the next, whereas for 3 years that's going to create a much more sustainable community.
And in terms of the community, another problem a lot of people I've spoken to today have gone through is to actually get to see their GP.
Yes.
I mean, the waiting times are not what they could be.
Yeah.
How would you address that situation?
Well, we know that in 2010, when the Tory Lib Dem coalition came in, they promised to protect the National Health Service. However, they introduced a £3 billion waste of money, which basically reorganised the NHS, which meant that there was a breaking up and fragmentation of the NHS, which has led to longer waiting times for GPs, longer waiting times for ambulances, and worse conditions when you go to accident and emergency. Many hospitals are now breaking the 4-hour waiting guideline, so that instead of going in and seeing a GP or a doctor quite quickly in A&E, people are waiting longer and longer, and it's all tied up with access to a GP. If you can't get access to your GP, you go to A&E, but the trouble is so many people now are waiting in A&E that that's getting longer and longer. So we feel that the coalition has failed and has let us down on the NHS, and that's something which we want to fix.
And in terms of crime in the local area, what ideas will you have to help reduce the crime rate?
Well, since 2010, when the coalition came in, we've lost over 130 police officers off our street in Haringey. If there's one part of the country where really need a police service, that's Haringey Borough. We know that Muswell Hill Police Station has closed and been sold off. We also know that not just Haringey, but also Hornsey Police Station, the hours have been cut right back. So if you take a police station closure and the hours being cut back at Hornsey, that's leading to much more uncertainty for residents around where do I go if I do have a crime to report. And also just that sense that what we do really need is the high quality neighbourhood policing. That's something which we've really missed out on in recent years. Really since Ken Livingstone was our mayor, we desperately need a new deal on policing whereby our neighbourhood police come back, because that's what we really do need.
What's your name, sorry?
Rachel Carr.
Rachel Carr.
Yeah.
And Rachel, I'm taking a wild guess. You are part of the Green Party?
Yes. Wearing my green outfit.
Okay, so why should we vote Green?
From my point of view, climate change is the urgent issue facing all of humanity, all of us.
To me, the policies make the most sense. I know they seem really different from how politics is at the moment, but I don't think different means bad. So if you take, for example, the policy on insulation, they want to spend 45 billion insulating people's homes, which sounds like loads of money, and I can see why it scares people. But actually, for every pound you spend on it, you make £1.27 back, because you're creating so many jobs, and you're saving people's fuel bills, and you're saving on the NHS bill because people are healthier. So just things like that, the policy makes sense as a whole rounded policy. It's not just doing what the electorate wants you to do, it's doing something that, it's not just doing something because it's the election coming up, it's doing something because it's the right thing to do.
Why is climate change a priority? Because some people might not know much about it.
Well, exactly, and it's a very urgent matter. If the planet temperature rises another 2 degrees Celsius, we will pass the tipping point when climate will be completely out of control and life on this planet may actually become impossible.
But overall, the Green Party, for example, to the average man, a carpenter, a builder, the plumber, what green policies would help him?
So for the average person, things like keeping the NHS completely public. So we don't want private interest in the NHS, so it's completely free at the point of use. Capping rent, so if you're in a 5-year tenancy, your rent only rises with inflation, which I think is a great policy for everyone, for young people, for working people, for everyone, that makes sense. We have got free education right up until further education, because education should be right. We want to make private schools, so at the moment private schools are technically charities, so they don't have to pay tax, and we'd get rid of that to try and make a more equal school system.
Would you bring back grammar schools? Why should we vote for the Green Party?
Well, it's a question of values and policies. In all surveys I've known of in the last few decades where they quiz people about which policies they like best, they don't tell people which policies are from which party. It's always the Green Party that wins by a large margin. I think because we have policies, although people don't know it, that they are the ones they like. The difficulty is getting people to know what our policies are.
When you say a question of values, what do you exactly mean by that?
So we'd get rid of academies, definitely.
Why is that? Sorry.
Because academies are basically schools which private companies can have a say in, and that doesn't make any sense. Like, you've got companies and private interests in our schools, and the schools shouldn't be run for anything other than education. So we want to see a system which is for people, not for profit, basically. Schools shouldn't be about making money, they should be about educating people.
And you would bring back grammar schools?
Which one's a grammar school?
Grammar school, so if you're like, for example, a really...
Oh, it's like a state school, but you have to do an exam, right?
It's like for the really kids that do really well at school, they go on to go to grammar schools, which is like a private school, but you're not paying for...
You're not paying, so it's like selective, but you don't
Yes.
pay, right? Yeah. No, basically I think the point is to make all state schools better. We don't want to select anyone out. It's not fair then. Like then you've still got a 2-tiered school system. We want to invest in our schools so much that all schools could do well, and children at any school have the opportunity to do well. It's not, if you're getting into a grammar school, you've probably still had some kind of privileged background. You might have like a tutor or like parents who are pushing you, and that's still not fair. Then you've still got a system which is separating people. We need to have just state schools that are all good and all equal.
And that's what you hope for?
Yeah, I hope for that, yeah.
So did you go to a state school or private school?
I went to a bit of both, actually.
Okay.
Yeah.
What did you prefer? Private school, okay.
No, I don't think so. It depends what you're looking at. Like, private school's smaller, state school's more interesting.
In what way would a state school be more interesting?
I just preferred it. Like, private schools was I went to an all-girls private school for a bit, and it was just a bit like concentrated on only exams and like getting through that, whereas state school they were a bit like wider. You could do more subjects, you could do more interesting subjects, like you could take photography, you could take drama, stuff I couldn't do in the school I was in before.
So in terms of schooling, how does the Green Party think about having a coalition with the Labour Party? I mean, are your education policies the same?
Our education policies are not really the same at all, no, because we want to bring schooling more into like the community, so have local government more in charge of their local schools and bring parents back in a little bit more, and Labour aren't really on that. I think they want academies at the moment. So in terms of coalition, if that's your question, we wouldn't enter a formal coalition, but we wouldn't enter a formal coalition, but we would support Labour on a vote-by-vote basis. So every issue that came up, we could say this is what the Green Party thinks, this is what our supporters think, that's how we're going to vote. Because if you're in government formally, you have to vote with government. Even if you don't agree with the policy, the party whip means you have to, right? And we're against that. We want to be able to vote for what we believe in still, not be kept to the party line.
So there wouldn't be a chance of a coalition with Labour or Lib Dems?
not like just not a coalition really. So if Labour form a minority government, we would happily support them informally, so they won't have enough MPs to get all of their policy through, so they'd have to rely on Green MPs to help put it through. So they'd have to obviously speak to the Green vote more.
Okay.
Speak to the left a bit more.
And what would you want to say to anyone who hasn't voted for the Green Party? Why should they vote for the Green Party next time round?
Oh, that's such a good question. Why should people vote? Like just one snappy thing? Is that what you're looking for here?
I'm looking for whatever you can give me.
Okay. Vote for the Green Party because we are the only people speaking sense. All the other parties are spouting the same nonsense. Sorry. About austerity. Austerity hasn't worked. It hasn't helped. The economy isn't better, and people are dying. People are living in worse conditions than before. Austerity isn't working. The Green Party are the only party to offer a proper alternative to austerity. That's why I think you should vote Green.
Thank you.
Okay.